Welcome to episode 173 of the Noclip Crewcast. Danny's here, Jeremy's here, Frank's here. Who else is here? Who knows? Do you believe in ghosts, Jeremy Jane?
No, I had a ghost encounter when I was a child, but I think it was my child brain just tricking me. I lived in a house in Massachusetts from the 1700s.
Oh yeah,
and it used to be like an old
witch's house.
Sunday school house. It was a witch's house. And I heard old-timey voices coming from the closet when I was a child, like yelling at each other.
What did they tell you?
And
were they talking to you?
I don't know. I couldn't understand them. Maybe they were trying to warn me about other ghosts, malevolent.
They were
ghosts.
saying, our son is playing too many video games. No, he's not. He's a good boy.
He needs to get fresh air and exercise.
Frank, how ghostly is your day going? Have you had any ghosts come visit you today?
Yeah, last night I had the craziest thing. I had 3 different ghosts come. One was like from the
No
past. One was from the present. It was nuts.
Wow, were they 4 months late?
Yeah. You know, they got caught in traffic. Their flights got canceled, so it's been crazy. Yeah. So
yeah, COVID was rough on ghosts with the lack of flights, you know, because that's the thing people don't realize. The ghosts, while they are sort of like they don't subscribe to most of the corporeal lessons or rules that we do, they can't just like fucking transport themselves. They have to sneak on airplanes.
Yeah,
and sit down.
They have to hope that someone misses their flight so they can take the empty seats. Like the seats aren't actually empty. That's, you know.
Or the deadhead.
They can't book the flights.
The pilot's deadhead seat. That's why it's called that. It's because ghosts usually sit there.
Or Jerry Garcia. It's the ghost of Jerry Garcia.
That's great. Good to know. Speaking of ghosts, all of these people will die, but right now they are our wonderful Battle Pass holders. Massive thanks to Harry Flanagan, Battle Royale Games, Arno, Richard Matherson, James Brown, Mark Rojas, Ryan Cobb, Tucker Morgan, Crimson Cyclist, Sven Huster, Pez, Tim Robinson, Eric Hamilton Schneider, Cameron Ladd. He's going to live forever. Zachary Snader, Alex Sharp, Alex Goucher, George Dakotas, Jacob Godserve, Tohir Tiliev, and Ryson. Thank you all so much for your incredible support. We are working on a bucket shed load of documentaries over here at the moment. Some of which we can tell you about, some of which we can't. We'll probably talk about them in a little while. I'm not sure what we talk. Sometimes I'm never quite sure what we've told the patrons, what we've told the YouTube.
I almost put the thing that I'm editing in the doc, and I was like, I don't want to force Danny's hand if we haven't talked about it yet.
I feel like, okay, let's open with that. We're going to talk about a lot of games today. We're going to talk about Hades 2. We're going to talk about Fallout 76. It is complete happenstance that they are also the only 2 documentaries we have ever done on previews of games. So that is good. And also, like, one of the documentaries basically made the format for the other documentary, but we'll talk about that later. So we are going to talk about those in a second. But yeah, the one you're editing at the moment is a project that I was trying to do last year for a long time. And we got one interview for it. And then I had a bunch of other people set up for these other interviews, and they just kept canceling or ghosting, and I just couldn't get it done. And I still haven't gotten those other interviews done. But in the meantime, I was like, let's just use that one interview. Like that, there's enough there for me, I think, for me to be interested in getting that stuff out. The game is Wipeout 2097, or Wipeout XL as it's known in the US, or I guess the larger Wipeout series. And the interview is with Cold Storage, who is the guy who did all the sound design for those games and also put together the soundtrack for those games. He wrote a bunch of songs, but he was involved in like the process of them getting, you know, like Firestarter and like Orbital tracks and Future Sounds of London and all that sort of stuff. So the documentary was supposed to be about Wipeout 2097. It's supposed to be an episode of Greatest Hits. We haven't managed to get it together, but we're going to put together a video about basically the music and sound of Wipeout, which is arguably the thing that people sort of that and the visuals obviously are the stuff that people vibe with the most. So yeah, you've been cutting that one up for the past week or so. less than a week.
Yeah. It's been super interesting. Not only because I am a nerd about music stuff, but also I'm aware of the Wipeout games, but I guess I kind of like I didn't realize the cultural niche that they fit into was kind of this bizarre like mid 90s UK rave scene thing.
Yeah.
Like I knew that was the music, but I guess I didn't realize that there's like one of the interesting things about it is the print ads that they ran of two people with like nosebleeds looking all fucked up like they just got back from the club and they did too much ketamine or something. And that was controversial, which is it's funny that that's controversial because this was the era when you'd have like a rated E for everyone Game Boy game, and the print ad in Nintendo Power would be like, "Hey kid, want to get your dick sucked?" And you'd be like, "What the fuck is this?"
Like a buxom lady holding up the Game Boy in between her
totally
breasts. Yeah.
I don't understand how this was more controversial. I guess drugs and sex have a weird
I think in the
relationship
UK there was a
West.
bit of a sort of like the satanic panic thing. There was a sort of like a pill, like drugs, like our teenagers are dying because they're taking too much ecstasy. Like I think that was which I don't think they were, but I think that was the panic that was going on.
Yeah, I mean, there's. It's funny because this is an area of weird expertise for me. There definitely like were deaths from ecstasy in that era, but it's gotten so much fucking worse. Like things are so much more tainted.
Oh, really?
It's funny now because if you read about people, in fact, I just out of curiosity on my off hours went and looked up some like forums about people talking about ecstasy in those days, just out of curiosity, because he mentions it like in the interview. He says it like, I saw, they went out to the clubs because he wasn't into club music, which is also my favorite part of the doc, is that he's like, yeah, I fucking hate all that music at the time. So they like took him out to the club to kind of initiate him, and so he could, understand the hype of it. And he's like, I was like, let's go to the bar. They're like, no, we're not drinking tonight. And he's like, oh, okay. And he's like, and then people started taking like little tablets, and like, I didn't do it, but it was like everyone was doing it. And he has this like aha moment where it clicks for him, like what's appealing about this type of music. But it is interesting because when you read about people who are nostalgic for the ecstasy of that day, they talk about it as like the strongest and purest.
Right.
But as I'm going back and looking up things from back then, they're like, it's like you never know what you're getting. It's like so dangerous, and it's very odd how like the sands of time have kind of like changed I guess as it's only gotten worse. At the time it probably seemed scary, and now it's just like, oh well, they didn't even know like fentanyl was on the scene and stuff. Yeah. People are just like, oh, I'll have that one night on those white doves, dude. I was flying, man.
It's he talks about the hackers stuff as well, right? There was like a hack.
Yes.
There's like a game in Hackers that kind of looks a little bit like Wipeout. And it was like a sort of a tech demo thing that they gave them, and that's part of the. Hackers is very far from what was going on in the UK rave scene, but like it's almost like the sort of like American version, or like a different version of it. And Wipeout exists in there too, and it's one of the things I wish we could do is talk to like Designers Republic, like the guy who runs Designers Republic is one person I was trying to get a hold of for a while. Sounds like he's a busy dude. But like the whole look of the game, like the logos, the box art, all that stuff is like, it definitely was just very cool. And then it was also like it was a 3D game on a new 3D console, and it was just so fast. Like it just looked it looked crazy, and there was dance like Firestarter was playing, and you were shooting rockets and shit. Like it was like, what is this? It's amazing. Yeah.
One of my favorite other anecdotes he tells is that when they were conceiving of the game, someone from the crew was playing Mario Kart with the sound off and listening to rave music. And he was like, what if this was like way faster? And I was like, that's the best origin story I could possibly imagine. Because that's exactly, that's what it is. I went back and played because they mentioned Mario Kart, I captured some footage of Super Nintendo Mario Kart. And while I was playing it, I recorded sound, but I turned my speakers down and just blasted some fucking
drop some Aphex Twin on top of it. Or
I literally was listening to Aphex Twin.
And that's a good point. So this is going to be a weird documentary for us because we are almost certainly going to get copyright stricken on this one on YouTube, and we don't know what's going to happen. We'll test it beforehand. But at the very least, they're going to plaster it in ads probably. They might mute stuff, and also we might get blocked or geo-blocked. So what's probably going to happen is that we're going to put this up on our Patreon. It might be for patrons only. We haven't figured it out yet, because also that opens the door for us doing maybe a bigger Wipeout doc down the line at some stage. We're not quite sure. The other alternative is that we can make it available for free patrons, which means all you'd have to do is just hit you don't have to put any. You can become a free patron of Noclip, and basically it puts you on a mailing list, and we give you updates on what's going on with stuff. You don't have to put in any credit card details or anything. You just have to have a Patreon account. Takes 2 seconds, and then you're a free patron. So we may have to do it that way as well to put it behind some sort of wall. But we haven't crossed that bridge yet. So that's because the alternative is you do one on the music of Wipeout and you don't play any of the music, and that is completely pointless.
Yeah, it's all audio network. It's all Kevin MacLeod.
We love Kevin.
I love Kevin MacLeod.
Or the 20 people that represent the Kevin MacLeod pseudonym or whatever. But yeah, we want some. I want some F-Sol on there. I want some of those.
I put I'm gonna spoil the surprise now. I put Dub Gusset in there because I know you love that song.
Oh my god!
I specifically put it because I know you like that song.
Was that on the soundtrack for the first Wipeout or something? Or?
No, but you guys have a side conversation about Rhythm and Stealth.
Oh god, Left Field. Yeah, Left Field are probably my favorite dance duo or dance act of that era. Fucking Dub Gusset.
It's a good song. It's a good album.
Isn't it a good album? It's a good album.
It's really good. Yeah.
Fuck. There is one Left Field song on one of them. I forget which one.
Yeah.
Swords
there's,
maybe or something. No.
I can't remember which it is. I can check my files. I pulled all the.
It's not Africa Shocks or ones you'd expect maybe.
No, I did pull a bunch of live footage of them from the night because this is another weird edit because you can't just like show generic. When he's talking about going to stand on stage with Left Field, you can't be like, and here's the game. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a lot of.
So I pulled a bunch of live footage, and there was a great moment where it was like it might have been like Glastonbury or something, but there was like a performance and there where Left Field were playing.
Right.
Was Africa Shocks is the name of the song?
Yeah, but it might have been Africa Shocks, maybe.
Whatever has Africa in the title, because then it cuts to the like cheesy announcers between acts, and the guy's like, now wouldn't it have been great if African Bambaataa was playing with them during this?
Right, because he sings on Africa Shocks.
Yeah. Oh, he does. Okay. I thought the guy was just making a loose wordplay association.
He was just doing an Africa thing?
That's what I thought he was doing. I didn't know there was any association. Yeah, that makes way more sense.
He sings on the single. Yeah, or on the yeah, which is
okay, cool. See, I only know Left Field through literally the only time I've ever listened to Left Field is when you and I were driving through LA and you were like, "This is the best album ever," and we blasted it.
It's so good. Do you know Roots Manuva at all?
Yeah. He's on the opening, right?
He sings on Dusted on the opening track. Yeah, exactly.
I love Roots.
Witness the fitness, man. So there you go. This is why you're the only person. You're like the only person in the world who can edit this because it's about like fucking weird Euro drum and bass and house music and video game development. It's like this is Jeremy James' fucking Venn diagram.
And low pass filters.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Holy shit. Anyway, so that one's coming. What else are we working on? We're working on the Dwarf Fortress doc I got loads of it done this week. So it is maybe 70% along at this stage. It's beefy. I think I might split it into 3 episodes because they are so dense that I feel like and they are so distinct that I feel like you need to do them separately. Like the first 30 minutes is about everything leading up to them putting out the first Dwarf Fortress download. The second one is all about Dwarf Fortress. The third one is all about sort of the medical stuff, the Patreon, the 1.0 since then as well. So it feels like it's at least an hour and a half. Like it might be longer. Hyperlight Breaker episode 3 is pretty much done. I'm just making some last minute tweaks based on feedback from the studio. I always get them to do a pass for accuracy, and there was a couple of bits and bobs I got wrong in my VO and stuff. So I'm fixing that stuff up. It's about 30 minutes long, so that should be up for early access patrons in the next little while. And then the other one, I'm not sure we're talking about. We recorded it this week. It's really good. We had a great interview with an indie studio that made one of last year's most celebrated indie games, crewed from the Southern Hemisphere.
The clues are piling. I'm wondering how far are you going to take this?
Exactly. You could say it's like a game about like the water, and that you'd still have to think which one it was because other water games came out, like Waterworld. And they were great. They supplied us with an absolute metric shit ton of development, video and assets as well. So we're going to have a great stuff on that. But anyway, yeah. So look forward to that. We'll tell our patrons. I think we might have already told them we were planning on doing it for GDC. We were planning on recording that one in person, and then because of my medical stuff, we couldn't do that, so we did it remotely this week, and they were fantastic. Eldritch Horror as well. I'll just drop that one in there. Now you know which of the Water indie games it was from last year. So look forward to that on Noclip in the next couple of months. All right, let's talk about video games. A game that I played a lot of years ago, and then we put out a documentary of, or before we did, and has had a tumultuous time, shall we say. Even pre-release it did. It's having a bit of a second life. It's not Second Life, though. Because of the new TV show. Fallout 76, the 76 Fallout game. Set in 2076, 300 years after the American tricentennial, of course. So you guys jumped in, Frank and Jeremy both did. Frank, let's go with you first of all. Have you ever played Fallout 76? Like what made you jump in, and how have you been experiencing beautiful West Virginia?
Yeah, so Fallout 76, it was around the same time I got back into Fallout 4 just a few months ago. Like before the show came out, Fallout 4, again, I talked about a few podcasts ago, was like one of those big backlog games I never played. I got to the point with Fallout 4, even before I beat the game but didn't do all the DLC, where I was like, okay, I think I'm done with this game, but I still want to try Fallout. So I downloaded 76, and I was immediately overwhelmed by like the character creator, the options, the special, the perk cards, all this stuff. And I bounced off it and went back to Fallout 4. Then we watched the show, and I was like, oh, shit, I want to play more Fallout. And so, around the same time, I heard everyone talking about, like, 76 is starting to explode. People are talking about it. I have two different friends who have basically spent their lives in Fallout 76, so if I need to, they can carry me or give me resources or whatever. And so I gave it another shot this week, and it finally, like, grabbed me. And so I'm playing it on PSN. I think it was included on both Game Pass, PSN, Steam. They had a giant Fallout sale with everything. So I think Fallout 76 was like, I don't know, $10. It's pretty cheap on the Steam store. And so
am I crazy in thinking it was free to play for a little while there off this? I might be completely wrong on that. I'm not quite sure. Yeah. Anyway, go on.
So I'm diving into it. Immediately, I will say it's kind of, it feels like anytime you dive into an MMO that's had years of updates, it's overwhelming the amount of stuff there is. Because I'm trying to delineate, like, okay, what is the original, like, main story thing? Then there's, like, the Wastelanders DLC, which added NPCs, which is the stuff that's, like, charming and fun. Yeah. And then there's, like, I just got to the part where it's like, oh, you want to go Atlantic City? Hop aboard. And it's like, oh, wait, that's, like, the newest stuff. And then there's dailies, events. There's so much stuff happening. But after spending, like, 15 hours or so, I'm like, okay, I'm starting to find a flow of this game, and it's very relaxing in the same way that, like, during quarantine, I played maybe 100 hours of Destiny. Years before, I would play World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, and I realized, like, oh, I haven't been playing an MMO in so long. But the reason I'm enjoying this game, it was actually a tweet by Dave Oshry, who said something like, yeah, the real secret with 76 is it's a great single-player game. I was intimidated with 76, thinking like, oh, do I need to have 4 friends at the ready, like Helldivers? Like, no. Playing it by yourself, it's so calm and gentle. Because it's like the core loop of Fallout. You pick up a bunch of side... It's like a Fallout that's all side quests.
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
That's literally what I wrote in my notes.
Yeah, and it's like, cool. So it's like I'm not overwhelmed. I also don't feel like there's any quest that's going to be like an hour. Like in Fallout 4, I loved, but there'd be quests where it's like, go into this factory and it's 2 hours of like, and then at the end there's all this stuff. Like you have to do big conversation choices with NPCs, and it's like, it's fun, but like, where 76, it's like every mission max takes maybe 10 minutes, and you can constantly fast travel back to your home base, dump stuff off. The loop is great. Because it's been out for so long, it feels pretty easy in the sense of like players are running around if you want to group up with them. People are pretty generous. Like every train station has like donation boxes where people are just dumping stuff, especially for like newcomers. And now the thing that's kind of hooking me is kind of the same thing with like Valheim or Minecraft. Is anytime you jump into a server, people have their base camps, and people have been playing this game for years, have the most elaborate, insane like houses or camps. Meanwhile, my thing was like, my camp is like when I played Pal World, or even it's like okay, I have the cooking pot, the weapon bench, the repair bench, the bed, and that's it. It's like the most basic crap. But now I'm seeing other people build stuff, and I'm like, wait a minute, okay. I started to get the appeal, so it's fun to poke around. Yeah, it's really fun and relaxing. And again, I'm going in with no expectations. I avoided 76 when it came out. I heard about all the problems, all the,
yeah, it felt empty, I think, was the biggest problem with it. I like my frustration with 76, or at least like the sort of broad reaction, actually, maybe too. I had frustrations with the game and also the reaction to it. I think I've talked a lot about like how my sort of objective way of loving games or subjective way of loving games is I really like exploring maps, and I can get away with that for a long time and really enjoy it. And 76, I think the map in 76 is absolutely fantastic. Like there's so much interesting stuff in there. There's a lot of variety. Obviously it's greener than you're used to seeing in a lot of Fallout games, but then there's the windy mountainous stuff. There's the sort of destroyed stuff that you have in the south. I just loved exploring it, and I like the big missions where you have to stealth and do all that sort of stuff, but you can't do it in a live game like that. You can't do it on an online game. It's just, and somebody could just come in and kill you at any time. You can't save. So yeah, having a world that sort of balanced the quests that were interesting, especially at the start, it just didn't have them. It felt very collect 5 ruin pelt, like the whole thing did. Whereas I just liked walking around. So I was doing a lot of the jobs, a lot of the quests, basically just so I could get enough resources so I could keep exploring the map. And to me, that was enough. To me, that was actually like a really satisfying, not a really satisfying loop, but a somewhat satisfying loop. I liked all the nuclear bomb stuff. I found that really interesting when they launched with it. But yeah, it was when Wastelanders got added and they launched the NPC stuff, and it added a bit more like soul to the experience. Like before that, it felt very much like a PUBG map or something, or a Fortnite map. It felt like a game. You know what I mean? Kind of like that thing we were talking about with the Fallout TV show, where sometimes it felt like it was a bit of a theme park. The 76 map sometimes felt really real, like especially when you went into like abandoned towns and stuff. I thought like that stuff was so well done and way more atmospheric than you get even in Fallout 4. Like I wonder what it's like playing this game for a while and then going back to Fallout 4. Like the Fallout 4 has some great like parts in it, and like Boston's done well and Diamond City's done really well, and bits and bobs here and there. But there's something about, I don't know, there's something about 76 Wasteland that I really, really connect with. I love that it has the sparse I'm on my own, no one the fuck is around here-ness of 3 and New Vegas, but with density and detail like that you don't get in those games because they're just deserts. Jeremy, what have you made of it? Because again, you're like you're more into the older Fallout stuff. You've not played Fallout 4, so this must have been a real weird jump, because this game kind of plays a lot like Fallout 4, not exactly, but in terms of the controller and the menu and all that stuff, it's in the same sort of ballpark.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like I feel like I've had to get used to it, is how I would describe it. I kind of didn't know what restaurant. It's like someone took me to the tapas restaurant and I was like, what's tapas? And they're like, you'll see. And they kept bringing out little tiny plates. And I'm like, when does the entree come? I'm really confused.
Right.
But as I kind of settle into it, I've been appreciating it more. I kind of was like, I was waiting for the golden path to feel more grandiose and kind of blow up more. And it's like Frank said, I kind of feel like I'm just doing a lot of little side quests and stuff. But as I've come to appreciate that flavor more, I think I've come to enjoy it more, because it kind of is just like go adventure with your friends and there's a bunch of stuff to do in this world. But in my mind, a Fallout game, like even not even like Fallout 1 and 2, but even like 3 and New Vegas are kind of the ones that are most, prevalent in my experience. I am so used to having like an overarching goal, and that's kind of the thing into which everything else is cast in relief, where it's like, oh, I have to do this for a minute and then back to, I got to go back to Vegas. I got to go back to this. And it's interesting just to kind of be like out there. It does remind me of playing MMOs as a kid with my friends, where like my best friend who I played Star Wars Galaxies with as a kid, we spent a whole like summer where we would just play Star Wars Galaxies, and then we would like stop for the day and we'd go out and we'd hike in the woods, and the whole time we were out in the woods we'd hike around talking about Star Wars Galaxies.
It's like something out of a fucking coming of age movie here. Jesus. Fair play.
And then he died tragic. No, just kidding.
The bees got him, didn't they?
That's the movie twist. Yeah, exactly. No, but it's like, it was kind of this weird thing where I remember that experience very kind of like seamlessly, as it was like hiking in the woods and playing an MMO. They were both just like me and my buddy walking around in an environment, like just
funny.
adventuring.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like that sense of place felt very intermingled. And as a kid, I think that's why I was attracted to video games in the first place, was like a sense of adventure and, you know, having like a digital place to explore, not just sneaking through the cow fields to access the woods behind them. So yeah, no, it's, I think as I come to appreciate that element of Fallout 76, so that it's like a virtual place with a bunch of emergent kind of little adventures to have a la carte, I've come to appreciate it more. Yeah, because the thing that initially produced friction for me was that when you go into the quest segments, kind of, there's the party leader, and the party leader kind of initiates them and goes in, and you're kind of just there hanging out. And if you want to progress it on your quest log, you have to go in separately and initiate it on your own.
Okay.
So at first I was like, oh, that kind of sucks, because like I'm just gonna have to like I either have to watch every segment twice. I don't know if this is like this the entire game, but so far it has been. I either have to watch it twice, or I just have to rely on someone else to be the quest log manager.
Okay, really? Right.
So I think I was like kind of like, oh, okay, well, so I don't get to have a story experience, or I have to have every story experience twice. Right. But I think there's less pressure on that element of the game to be kind of the meat and potatoes of it. I think it's more about the grand adventure. So I've come to appreciate it.
It's a funny game because it does feel like it's kind of caught between two worlds, and you have to kind of meet it or something, you know, which I think when players have expectations of what they wanted, like I understand the reaction to the game. I think there were some people who were never going to like this game, which I totally understand, because it's a, you know, I didn't play much of this game either when it came out. I played it a bunch, and then I dropped off and then never played it again. You know, I built my base and I did a bunch of the quests and I explored the map a bunch, and then I was like, all right, I think I'm done. That's, you know, whereas the other games I feel like I've gone back to a lot. I've enjoyed them a lot. And maybe it's the communication. Maybe I remember when it's funny because our documentary, it's sort of like pointed at as the one Noclip thing that we kind of dropped tonally. We dropped the ball on tonally, and it's really, and I've probably come across as overly defensive on it. I think the way we approached it, I think or the way I approached the production of it and the script writing on it was aged like fucking milk in the desert when the game came out. And I totally appreciate that. And one of the things that I learned definitely, which we kind of already knew on a lot of the stuff we were doing, which is that we wanted the stuff to be as evergreen as possible. We wanted it so if you watched it before the game came out, or 2 months after a game came out, or 10 years after a game came out, that the context of when this is so apparent that it's an evergreen thing. And then the other thing I learned in that process was to not talk about features that aren't finished yet. And they were talking optimistically, of course, about what they were trying to get in this game for launch. And obviously the fucking launch window for this game, or the last couple of months, they didn't get a lot of what they wanted in there. So when the Hades series came along, it was like, okay, we know what to do. Don't talk about anything that's not in this episode. Don't talk about what they're working on next. Don't talk about what they are hoping the game will be, because you can do that in a studio, because everyone at the studio and everyone in video games knows that sometimes you don't fucking get everything in the game, or something breaks, or you have to refine it, or whatever it is. But in the way we shoot stuff, where it's so like high production value, it just communicated it wrong. I also feel like if you want to know why that game was broken so much at launch, there is no better investigation into that than our documentary, because it's literally talking about, we have this old engine that does not work for multiplayer. The entire game is based around the concept of what they named Atlas, which was the main character. Everything in the world is related to one entity, one person. So to try and make that engine work, where it has multiple people, not just in terms of like, I'm not talking about how it's like rendered or how it's loaded, just in how the logic of the quest systems and everything, inventory, you know what I mean? Like how many guns people are allowed to have in that world. it's all tied into that and how much of a pain in the ass it was trying to pull Atlas out of that game, as they said. I think there's a lot there, but yeah, I think I do. The point I'm trying to make in terms of that, and I hope it's not coming across as overly defensive, but at the time, I remember we went in and I did because I was living in Maryland. I went in to the studio and they did a presentation for me, and I had all of these questions because the presentation they first showed of 76, which was similar to what they showed at Summer Games Fest, honestly kind of raised more questions than answered them because it was doing something completely fucking different. So we were like, what? Imagine you never heard of 76 before. It gets announced, and then you're like, so is it going to be like World of Warcraft style MMO? Is it going to be more like the Division maybe, where you're sort of getting loading into these instance areas? Like, how does the progression work? Do you make your own character? All of these things. And they were all the initial questions that our documentary answered. And when it came out, people were like, oh, watch the Noclip thing. They actually tell you what the game is. Like, the original thing is like more of a tonal, this is what we're trying to do. And then our one sort of actually solved a problem for a lot of people of like, what is this game? Why are they making it? How are they making it? And how does it play? But then by the time the game comes out, all that context is fucking lost. So in one way, I really like that documentary still, because I think for about 3 months, people really liked it and it answered a lot of questions, and it was something exciting that maybe Noclip could do in the future, is like explore this stuff. And then once the game came out, there was such a backlash to it that I was like, oh yeah, there's a lesson here to be learned, like in how I approach these projects, that like I can't, it's no good if people like it and then suddenly there's a twist on the other side of it, you know?
Yeah. Like kind of even like separate from the documentary itself, I do feel like 76 is illustrative of something I've been thinking a lot about recently, which is that I feel like having an instantaneous, hyper amplified feedback mechanism where the voices of the masses are instantly heard about video games is almost like a creatively stifling force, because I think it's important for people to give feedback on games. I think it's important for people to, like, if you spend $70 on a game and you can't return it, you're like, fuck this. I think it's important to be able to like feel like you can reach out and give feedback and whatever. But I also think that one of the things I respect about 76 is that it tries something so radically different with such a well-established series.
That's the sad part for me. Yeah, is that this whole thing, Bethesda make a very similar game
exactly
all the time, and
don't you want them to try shit?
Yeah, and that I am with you on that. I think that the reaction to it in some ways really embittered me to some facets of gaming community, because I was like, what's the fucking end goal here? I know you don't like Bethesda, or I know you wanted Fallout the MMO, which like people worked on for years and it didn't work and they canceled it because, and like, what does that tell you? And then I get it. I get they love, and in a way, this goes back to the fucking Black Isle Interplay stuff. In a way, Fallout has become this sort of proxy for people to complain about who's making the game. Like, because that we talked about that even last week. The Obsidian versus Bethesda shit is constant. Like, and I find it like the sort of, I had a couple of people I was talking to about this week. The rewriting history on all this stuff is really interesting, because I think people are warming to 76, and then some folks are like, oh, well, it's because like they added AI, or they added, enemies, and they added all this stuff, which is very true. Like, it is, like, it's a better game years later. I still argue that this game should have been launched like 50% of the cost and had early access written on it, and none of these problems exist. I think, because then the game is launched full price. People are pissed off about it. The whole canvas bag thing with this collector's edition, which was a storm in a fucking teapot. Nobody who got that collector's edition gave a fuck about the canvas bag, I'm sure. But that, or maybe some of them did, and they should have done a better job of that, sure. But that only gets brought in because basically people are just looking for ammunition to launch at this fucking thing at that stage.
Yeah.
And it does make me sad that, like, yeah, we have a studio that went and did something weird. In many ways went to do it to save another closing studio that was making these types of games that they bought and then put on this project. Like, that's a whole element in my head. I'm sure it wasn't that charitable, but like basically all of those folks in Texas were working on, like, to me it was like, oh, we're like, sure, maybe they didn't do a great job, or maybe they sold it differently in their marketing, which I think happens with Bethesda stuff sometimes. But yeah, what are we doing here? We're just gonna criticize people for trying to do fucking weird shit? I don't know.
I feel like the moment it clicked for me is when I was playing Morrowind. I did a little bit of research into how Morrowind was received at the time, and there was like, because in my mind Morrowind, because like, you know, I was pretty young when Morrowind came out. I wasn't extremely online when Morrowind came out, and also fewer people were, and there was less of kind of like, you know, digital infrastructure for that. The communities were more niche, if the same amount of vocal, more niche, and so. In my mind, Morrowind is like, oh, everyone must have loved this when it came out. This is fucking cool. This game's a classic. But then if you go back, there were people who were like, Daggerfall was huge. Why'd they make this like fucking tiny little dinky ass map? Like, I don't understand why they would betray the sandbox roots of the series.
100%. Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's important for people to feel heard and to be heard, and for there to be, you know, a permeable layer between creator and audience. But I do kind of think that I think in a world where that layer was a little less permeable and that there was a little less feedback coming through, I think we would have weirder and more interesting games. The thing that I kept thinking is, you know, the response to Fallout 76 being so hostile and toxic is in part the reason that Starfield is a game that on paper is so different, and in you know, pragmatic terms is so safe in every way. Yeah. And it's like, there could be like a bizarre fucking psychedelic ass Starfield that exists, but I think the risk of having another 76. Yeah.
And I don't want to like, you know, I think we probably advocate for developers more than a lot of game coverage things. And that is such a malleable thing, because people like to say some studios are money hungry, corporate, whatever's, and other ones are independent and they're all, you know, the sun shines out of their arses, and that it can be the case sometimes, but like, everyone who works on a game is doing it for their own reasons. And like, we've been to Bethesda, and there are people, the average tenure there for the longest time, I think it's definitely changed post 76, but for the longest time was like 12 years. Like, there were people who were there for a long fucking time who really enjoyed working on those games. And I do think there has been a lot of change at BGS in Maryland, and it's a way bigger studio, and I think a lot of the leads are gone, and it's a lot of younger workforce, and I think it probably is a lot different. Which is a bit of a sidebar, but I do think that, like, sometimes I've always posited that Bethesda in particular is a studio, and maybe it's their own doing, maybe it's the way they talk about their games, I don't know what it is, but they do get a lot of criticism. But the thing that I'm interested in turning into an old fart, like I am, I'm 38 now, is the moving target of what's cool to say was a good game. And I think this is like something that I did not understand when I was younger, and especially when you're online, having the cool opinion is basically like online currency, is how like a lot of this, what's the game that people say is cool? And you made a point of saying about Morrowind, if you talk to it's funny because I'm editing this Dwarf Fortress documentary, and they're basically talking about Morrowind in this, because they're saying, like, for the longest time you had RPGs that were going in this like sort of, some of them were drifting towards the Baldur's Gates now, where it's very story and character based, and then you had the Bethesda ones, which were sort of aping off of the first person Ultima Underworld stuff, right? But then you had this subset of people who thought that a lot of those games, like Daggerfall, were going to continue in the sandbox simulation way, and that they were going to stay probably graphically, you know, fairly basic, but they were going to add complexity. And that's what Dwarf Fortress was. And that's what a lot of those games were, like the NetHack mods that people did for years. But that died. But they looked at games like Morrowind and went, what are you doing? You're like simplifying this game. You know, it's all about the aesthetic now. But when you talk to people today about what the cool Elder Scrolls game, the best Elder Scrolls game is, the cool answer is fucking Morrowind, right?
Totally.
Fallout 3, same problem. You had all these people who were like, that's not my Fallout. Fallout is an isometric game where you have all of this choice and consequence, and it's not this first-person shooter bullshit. Fallout New Vegas, you had the same thing. Fallout New Vegas came out, the reception was horrific. People did not like it. They said it was buggy, there was problems with it. Then there was this sort of urban myth that flew back on Bethesda, where they were like, oh, it's because they forced them to release it and when it wasn't finished and all this sort of stuff. I don't know if that's true. I've never seen receipts for any of that sort of stuff. And then, so I do find it interesting that like all these games are good. Like Morrowind's great. Fallout New Vegas is brilliant. Fallout 3 is great. Fallout 4, I think, is really good. A lot of people are playing Fallout 4 at the moment. It's very much, again, away from the simulation, the sandbox stuff towards this more like, modern take on a single player RPG. But yeah, I feel like 76 maybe it came out at a time when people hated live games. Maybe that's what they thought it was. It was the money grab for the live services game, but and it does have some of that stuff in there. Right? Is that stuff in there? I don't think it has any pay to win stuff or pay to.
They have something called like Fallout First, which is their like premium battle pass. It's like $6 a month, and then they do seasons. But even if you don't have First, you still get like in-game currency to spend on like limited like cosmetics. But
you can buy that stuff, right, for cosmetics.
Yeah, so you have like atoms, and you can earn that by just doing dailies, or you can spend more money for it. But in terms of pay to win stuff, people talked about like they used to have legendary weapons, but that's not in there. They changed the system. Right. There's things that make the experience easier, like you get more stash space or stuff like that if you pay for it. But like there isn't something where it's like pay $7. All right, you have the best guns and max armor.
I think I'm with people on that. To me, that I don't like that, or I'm fine if that's in a free to play game. You can stick that in Warframe, and that's not a problem. But if you're asking me to spend a lot of money on a game and then there's that stuff in there. Have you found that stuff, Jeremy? Does that get in your way or?
I kind of just saw the store on the front page. I didn't even open it, so I actually kind of didn't even know how it worked. Honestly,
oh, that's cool. So it's like Rocket League maybe, where it's somewhat put off to the side. Yeah, that stuff's a moving target too, though. In a way, I'm surprised it isn't free to play yet. It kind of is because it's on Battle. It's not free to play, but it's somewhat free to play.
I got it for very cheap as well. I think it was on sale for like, I don't know. There's no way I paid more than $10.
How did you not have a code? How did we not? I'm sure I got.
That's a good fucking question. I don't know.
I'm sure we got a code. I couldn't tell you.
They revoked my access with the doc.
Yeah,
flops.
maybe. Yeah, it didn't fly. It's one of our most popular videos. It still is.
I know, you're right.
It still fucking is. Yeah, maybe everyone can now discount everything I've said being defensive because I got a code from the publisher, so that's why.
Hell yeah.
I'm bought and paid for.
Pay to win.
What is it you're enjoying about it? Is there anything in particular? I thought the map was fantastic. I loved like that big theme park up in the north and like coming across the mountains for the first time and all that stuff. The shooting's good too, I think, but then the shooting was good in Fallout 4, I think too. What have you guys been liking about it?
The map kind of does have the tone of more of like Dead Island or Dead Rising. It's a bit sillier, but not like annoying. Like it's so funny because I've been wanting to play something like Borderlands. I've been wanting to play something like Dead Rising, but as soon as I started 76, I was like, this is it. It's like mindless but fun shooting silly stuff. Like I went to like a golf club and it's like ghouls in golf clothes and you're shooting them.
Oh
like,
yeah,
that's kind of like
I remember that.
Yeah, that's cool. So what I really liked about Fallout 4 was the Nuka World DLC. It was so creative and silly, and it feels like that energy is all Fallout 76. It's like, oh, this is pretty cool. For me, it's like the Fortnite thing where I generally like seeing other players walk around with like dumbass usernames or whatever, like silly things like that. And it's just like, I don't know, it's like parallel play. It's like I'm on a server with 20 other random people. Right. We're all doing our own little thing, but it's like, I don't know, like Wizard 420 just completed a quest. You get some extra bottle caps. Like, cool, great. Or there's an event starting. Come here. And I see like some other random users you play, and it's just these quick little quiet moments that are very charming. And yeah, I the shooting generally feels. I really like the shooting in Fallout 4 76. The way I've also described it is like, if Fallout 4 is Red Dead Redemption 2, then 76 is Red Dead Online.
Yeah,
and that's what it is. Because there was during quarantine again, I spent maybe 3 months playing Red Dead Online and really liking it until I burned out. And playing Fallout 76 on PlayStation, I think there's like, actually, I think it's intentional. I think there's 76 trophies. So every like 20 minutes, it's like bloop, bloop, bloop. So my goal, my end game is there's an achievement for getting level 100. So I'll probably keep playing until then, see if there's anything more. But I'm really interested in the Atlantic City stuff, but I think I'm going to clear a lot of the main map stuff first before that, which I think that stuff just came out like last year or a few months ago.
Okay.
And then I might get into the base building. I might kind of mess around because I also just discovered this golf course, and I'm like, damn, I could build a base on the golf course. That's kind of where I want to hang out. I don't know. So I'm finding it charming. I don't know when I'll drop it or how soon I'll drop it, but I think I'm honestly just chronologically going through all the Bethesda games because we just replayed New Vegas. I played Fallout 4. I'm eager to do Starfield, but part of me is like, wait, let me do 76 first. Try Starfield again, and so we'll see. But yeah, in Jeremy's case, jumping into 76, that was my experience. I played New Vegas. My friend encouraged me, like, try 76. I hadn't played Fallout 4 yet, so I was so overwhelmed and confused because 76 has, like, I feel like 3 times the amount of features that even 4 does, just in terms of, like...
Yeah, it's a lot. It's the onboarding at the start is quite a lot. Like, I think with the cards and the money stuff, there was all that stuff going on. Like, once I feel like the vault does a good job of setting you up, but then once I got out into the world, I was a little bit, Jesus, what the fuck do I do now? Like... Yeah. Which is not the vibe you really want, maybe, with some of those games. Yeah,
the other kind of very overwhelming thing with this is anytime you get it, you have to, like, change the settings, but, like, anytime you pick up a new quest, it adds it to your active thing. So I'll be running in an area and, like, oh, miscellaneous quest, go investigate this. And then my right side of the screen is like in World of Warcraft, all the side quests are tracked. And you look at your map and it's like there's so much, and it's like the Ubisoft effect where I get so overwhelmed I want to turn off. But then I kind of just look at my map, do the closest thing, and do make active, and then it squashes it. And so once I finish a quest, I look at the map, I pick one thing and go, and it's just this, like, just constant, like, breadcrumbs, and go back to the base, and I like it. And yeah, I don't know. The one problem I have is ammo is pretty scarce.
Yes, it still is. Okay, yeah, that was a big thing.
And so I don't know if I need to waste bottle caps. People say, like, people just check the donation things, or people are pretty generous, because I find cool guns, but I run out of ammo immediately. Or they break, but maybe
I remember having to do a lot of, like, harvesting, because you can make bullets back at your base, right? So I remember having to go out and get certain things and then convert them all into bullets, but it just felt like busy work.
Yeah,
and especially in a live game, which feels like you're doing a lot. You want less of that stuff, less of the, like, I don't know, housekeeping, like stuff. I don't know. That because the encumbrance stuff exists as well, of course.
Yes,
fast travel is treated differently, so yeah, it's a little bit all over the place.
The one interesting thing, which now I kind of get, is I was always confused by the VATS system. Like, how do they make that work in online? And the way they do VATS is they just treat it as auto aim. And so I'm like, oh, okay, sure. That's it's kind of like in, what do you call it? Overwatch. What was it? Soldier 76 or whatever had his ultimate where it was just auto aimed everything.
Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of what VATS is like in this. So I'm like, oh, sure. Okay. I kind of like it. So
well, it's funny. Like, I don't want to talk about VATS in Fallout 4 quite yet because... but you're bringing up a lot of interesting stuff that makes me think, especially when Jeremy was saying, like, oh, he's playing this game but wondering where the sort of golden path main quest is. Tomorrow, myself and Jeremy are recording a fat session for Noclip Crew on Fallout 4, which I've played a bunch of times, really like, and Jeremy, who's from Boston, has never played before. So and now you seem to, like, be into 76, but, like, maybe I'd like to have a bit of story in it. So, like, I'm just rubbing my hands together, going, like, he's either gonna fucking hate this thing, or that's him gone for the next month playing Fallout 4, because it is a big ass game too. I'm excited for that. What are you enjoying about 76? What's the thing you like the most, Jeremy? Is it because you're playing with somebody as well?
I think that helps for sure. I think the thing I like about it is back when I played Enshrouded with some friends, the game that was like kind of the, like, Valheim is how I would describe it. The thing that I kind of talked about the most in my experience of that was kind of like pathfinding, because that game has an immersion digging system. And so the fun thing in Enshrouded was, we'd have to, like, get to a place and it's like, oh, well, we could walk all the way around this mountain, or we could, like, dig through the mountain. And it's like, I kind of just like games that let you just do weird pathfinding shit, I think is something that I've come to realize over the last several years. I think that's kind of like because, like, a sandboxy game, like Fallout 76, they're kind of like, oh, go, do you want to go collect stuff? Do you want to base build? Do you want to quest? Do you want to do this? And I think that, like, yeah, I just like pathfinding. So it's kind of fun just to pick a place on the map and be like, oh, that seems interesting. And then be like, okay, it seems like this highway leads up to it. Let's try to get to this highway. You walk there and it's like, okay, well, the highway is like a fucking sky bridge up there. I wonder if we can get up there.
Right.
Let's see if we can get around these hills. I kind of just like the, creating my own sort of self-generating breadcrumb trail by picking a location and trying to pathfind there. So that's kind of what I've enjoyed the most about 76. And there's been a few, like, weird, unexpected things that have happened. I don't know. There was one, I still don't know if this was like a bug or like an emergent thing, but there was like a ghoul in the open world, and I walked up to him and we started fighting, and he instantly like exploded and killed me. And I don't think it wasn't like a suicide bomber ghoul.
I remember that happening where there was an area with mines where there was lots of ghouls.
Oh,
I wonder
it was
if
a
that's
mine.
what it was.
Okay.
That's ringing a bell with me.
Regardless, I just like pathfinding with combat is just like is an easy win for me. Just like it's a clear objective structure, but it's self-directed,
right?
And having like little kind of like peaks and valleys of like, here's like a difficult combat bit. Now here's like a traversal bit. Here we have to do some pathfinding. Here's like a point of interest. I think that's kind of I think that's my golden path in Fallout 76.
Right.
It's just like picking shit and pathfinding there.
That's neat. Yeah. I remember one of the things I liked about 76 was the creepy stuff you'd come across, especially at nighttime and things like the Mothman and like some of these and like the new enemies and things. I thought there was a lot of interesting stuff there. It was like fun to push up against the limits of where I was comfortable in the world into areas with like higher level stuff and be like, oh man, it was like that Duskwood thing we talk about, you know, when you just go and see Stitches for the first time and you're like,
yeah. I saw a thing flying and like there's like a gargoyle in the sky. I don't even know. It looked like a fucking dragon, and I was like, I don't want to mess with that. Yeah. But yeah, exactly.
So I guess, you know, if I'm gonna lay my you know angry hypothesis on the table here and say, if I'm not talking complete horseshit over here about the sort of the cool drift that exists on these games. So we've all decided that, you know, nobody cares about Daggerfall and Arena anymore. They're gone. Morrowind is the sort of weird, funny one. Oblivion is now sort of cool and niche because it's not Skyrim, even though Oblivion, when it came out, was the most vanilla fucking fantasy world you could possibly imagine, coming off Morrowind, which made sense. Elder Scrolls 6 we're not going to play for like 6 fucking years. Let's table that for a second. Starfield is now the new one that people don't like, right? But it's hard to sort of like aggressively not like it because it's like it's not a bad game. It's just that like maybe it hasn't. There's aspects of it that tonally people aren't as excited about as some of these other ones, right? So that's where that exists. So do we think Fallout 4 now is maybe going to go through with the show? People are going to warm to Fallout 4 more now, and maybe 76 also becomes this sort of like, hey, they turned it around, or it's like a forgotten. Like it's a misunderstood game. I wonder if like in 2 years' time people are going to be like, oh yeah, 76, yeah, it launched bad, but then they turned it around. Are we? Because it doesn't quite have the cyberpunk No Man's Sky redemption arc or anything like that. It's not a game that's gotten that much attention. Like No Man's Sky's added like fucking 20 expansion packs. It's free.
I think the biggest telling thing with 76 is like how many people are still playing it a month from now. Like I'm enjoying it now, but will I eventually be like, oh, okay, I think I'm good. But
yeah, I agree. I feel like I haven't seen. I'm having a fun experience with it. Is kind of like the limits of my take on 76. Whether or not it's like a great game, a classic. I mean, this is why like when people tell me about movies, they're like, "Oh, have you seen Zone of Interest?" I'm like, "No, I don't watch movies until they've been out for 5 to 10 years." Because I don't know what has staying power. People get so fucking excited about movies when they come out because they're new. And, you know, for a while I would watch all the, you know, I'd see what are the 10 best movies this year and I'd watch them all. And I'd feel burned by like 70% of them because I'm like,
have you seen that remake of Crash? It's really good. It's going to win all the Oscars.
Yeah. So that's why, I mean, as I mentioned in the last podcast, that's why I've been watching fucking Japanese dramas from the 1940s because there's no hype left. The hype well is dry.
That's your Daggerfall.
Yeah, that's my Record of a Tenement Gentleman is my Daggerfall. So I don't know. I feel like games are kind of the same thing where, I mean, that's why this is something I was thinking when you were talking about like how opinion shifts over time on games is as much as I have gone through periods of my life where I really like video essays and YouTube videos where people are like, this game is actually a classic that no one talks. I kind of like the last few years, I've definitely cooled on that stuff and warmed more to just, you know, if there is a game that is old and interesting to me, whether it's a cult classic or a weird slept on game, I kind of just like to go play it. And like Kuon, the FromSoft survival horror game, I loved because it's like no one told me it was the best game ever. No one told me it sucks. I just knew it was like a weird old FromSoft game, and I don't think it's a 10 out of 10. But yeah, just having my own experience with it, I think was like the primary. Like I'll remember that game for a long time, not because it was the best crafted game ever, but because I had an experience with it that wasn't, you know, full of preconceived notions. So yeah, I don't know. But anyway, I don't know how much staying power 76 has, but I'm enjoying it. I guess.
Either do I, and it's funny because I feel like and this isn't me just trying to constantly look at the silver lining when it comes to this, but one of the things that I really don't like about live games is the design that requires you to keep coming back and back and back. And like, there are really popular games that have great fan communities. Like Warframe is a great example of that. But Warframe is a game that sort of like is designed for you to play a bunch of. And then what usually happens with Warframe is they do another big expansion pack and then everyone comes back and they play through all that sort of stuff. And then they do it again and again and again. And that's the lifeblood of that studio, right? So that makes sense. But that's not what Bethesda's doing with this. And I think like in some ways that's maybe a positive, that they're not just like trying to turn like this game doesn't feel as Skinner boxy as a lot of. But maybe also it's a $70 game, or was a full price game at one stage or close to it. So maybe it just is perpetually caught in two worlds. Maybe that's the problem. I'd actually be interested in people emailing in about this and what they think, because in one way, if this was a free to play games as a service game, there's a lot people would forgive that they don't, like the fact that there was, the story stuff wasn't in here and yada, yada, yada. But in the other way, like you don't get free to play games like this where the map is this well designed and dense and interesting and has the production value on the actual game itself is a AAA game quality game. It's just that the gameplay, a lot of it feels more reminiscent of what we now consider free to play. So maybe that's the ultimate problem with this game, is that it sort of exists in this it's new grounds that they broke, but it sort of exists between these two known quantities and people are coming at it from one side or the other, and most people aren't landing right in the middle. So I'm not quite sure. But anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree. It just like my closing thought on it is just that it feels that way genre-wise and game design-wise as well.
Yeah.
And I think that is the thing about the game that is both kind of like the roughest and most even, but also sort of the most interesting, is there are times where I like see other people in the open world and I feel like I'm playing Rust, and that's like that's weird and interesting. And I don't know whether I like it or not, but I know that it's different than other stuff I've played. It keeps defying my expectations, and whether or not it follows through and then is like, and it's like a really good game, the jury is out for me. But it is rare that a game, made by a studio of this much notoriety and size and scale and budget releases a game that's this weird, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said for, I mean, like, it's like I said earlier, it's like if you want games to try new things once in a while, if people actually fall through in that and do that, sometimes it's going to be like weird in a way that's not perfect. And I think that's good and healthy.
Yeah. Or it's not as good as or doesn't feel as good as a, safer game, and all of our tastes are different. It just is a little bit. I feel like what you said earlier really touched a bone with me, where it feels, I wonder how much Starfield is conservative as a reaction to the reaction to this. I do wonder that. Who knows? Maybe it's not. Maybe Starfield is exactly the game that they wanted to make, and it's just the inherent nature of space and having to fast travel everywhere is the way. Because spoilers, if anyone is listening who wants to play Fallout 4, play Fallout 4 in survival mode. It is such a different experience. You can't fast travel. It's not hardcore. Like it's not like roguelike style, but you have to like drink and eat and do all that sort of stuff. And it really helps you like settle into that world. I think it's kind of the way that a lot of people now will play Fallout 4, especially on multiple playthroughs. It's a really interesting way of doing it. And I wonder if Starfield, just by the nature of that fast travel stuff and everything else, just didn't connect, or was that more conservative? It'll be very interesting to see where they go with Elder Scrolls 6. I'm looking forward to playing it in 2037, whenever it comes out. When was Fallout 76? 2276, I think it was, something like that. 2076, I mean. Man, oh man. Okay, that was Fallout 76. Man, we talked for an hour about 76. That's pretty good. I want to talk about a game I played this week. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called Hades 2. It's a sequel to a little indie game that came out from some crowd in San Francisco. Super Gant, I think they're called. This is, of course, the Hades 2 technical test. So our good friends, Greg and Amir, and your good friends, if you're a Noclip documentary watcher, over at Supergiant Games have put out a technical test, which is basically them getting a bunch of data and heuristics and who knows, perhaps some gameplay feedback on Discord and stuff for Hades 2. It is a snippet of the game. The game is apparently very close to early access release, and the early access version of it is going to be bigger than the technical test. The technical test basically runs up to the first boss fight. So it's the first biome you're in up to the first boss fight. Once you complete it, basically there's a dialogue option that comes up and says you can consider yourself done with the technical test. That's pretty much everything you're going to see. I've played a bunch of this. Did you guys touch on this at all? Yeah, because it was also access stuff. There was like you had to like sign up on Steam and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, no, I added it to my Steam library and I haven't fired it. I've been like afraid to fire it up because when Hades 1 came out, I didn't play it. Even though we were doing the doc, I tried to play it as little as possible because I wanted to have the final experience. I didn't want to spoil myself on it.
Totally. And that is 100% what you will do if you play this or early access. Like I get it. Frank, you haven't touched this either, right? You can get it.
No, I just clicked the button on the Steam page to request access. So hopefully, or whenever it be.
So I think we all did, and then very kindly, just before the weekend, I think it was, one of our buddies, our good friend Greg over there, sent through some codes, which was very kind of him. So, so I've completed the technical test. I kind of almost don't want to talk about maybe specifics too much now that you're even saying that, especially as people will probably have that same opinion. Here, maybe this is how we start this. Do you have any questions about Hades 2? Like, is there anything about it that you're just on a super broad level interested in?
The one thing I saw is like on the Steam page it says the Titan of Time. So is there like time abilities or like rewind abilities or anything like that?
No, I would say no. Like the Titan, that's the sort of the broad quest of what you're doing, and that's the antagonist. That's pretty much said right away that you're looking for is a Kronos, I think, or something like that. So that's like in the same way that like when you started Hades 1, they're told you, oh, you're trying to break out. Like that's sort of the thing. I don't know how much to talk about. That's the thing. I don't know how much to talk about. Like, do I even talk about the protagonist in this game? Like, I honestly, like, how much you went. Okay, Jeremy, do you have any questions? And if not, I'm just going to go with like a sort of a.
I mean, I've seen a little bit of the game here and there.
We can't talk about that, I think.
Yeah.
So we're not doing a doc. We are not. I should let people just know straight up, we have not been filming with Supergiant for the past couple of years. We talked to them about it ages ago, like maybe a year and it wasn't even ages ago. It was maybe a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, something like that. We talked about Hades 2 with them, and we tried to come up with some sort of like what works as a pitch, but like some stuff with them has changed. They're more remote work now. We didn't have a great narrative angle for this one, except that we couldn't do maybe post-release. You know what I mean? We could do a Hades 2 doc once it's out, maybe, and they've said like maybe we'll do that. But during production, during early access, a lot of the beats that they would have, they've already done. So it felt like we couldn't figure out a story that felt compelling enough to really like try and sell them on it. And they also were coming from a perspective of like, we don't want to do another early access series like Developing Hell unless it's interesting and new, and we felt the same way, and we couldn't, it wasn't there. We couldn't find a solution that worked, and I personally don't think it exists there. But obviously in doing that, we saw some stuff a while back ago that we weren't able to talk about. But yeah, so you've seen some of that obviously already. So what is your, do you have any? Okay, you know what? I'm
just curious what stood out to you, I guess. Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it. So, what's different, I guess, is probably a good way of talking about it. So Hades 2 is in terms of the way it plays, it is very much like Hades 1. It's an isometric camera angle, roguelike, where you are doing runs, you are attempting to get through all these levels. You play as a different character. She's on the key art. You've probably seen a bunch of her. I'm not going to talk about her or anything because of obviously she is her name is Melinoe. She's a great character, great voice acting. The world is full of gods and characters, some of whom you may recognize from Hades 1, some of whom are completely new. The whole vibe of this one is much more sort of like occulty and witchy. Your sort of your protege, I guess, or your mentor rather, is a sort of this large, huge witch's hat wearing, covers almost her face, sort of lady called Hecate, which is very witchy as well. A lot of the stuff, similarly based on Greek myth and perhaps a lot of pagan stuff that sort of got like dragged into all that as well. And what I would say is like there are some things on the face of the gameplay which are different. Like I feel like the arenas are shorter, is at least in this first biome. I might be wrong, but it feels like they're giving you more boons as you get through it. The combat is different because the protagonist, sort of the weapons that she has and the way she plays is a bit different in terms of the regular weapons. Everything you have now has a special ability. So the cast, if you hold it, has a sort of power mode. The regular attack you do, which I think was in Hades 1, if you hold it down, often did like a power move. And then also what's the other one? Like when you hit B, it also does it like an AoE or something like that. There's a power move in that as well. So you have more moves, which also means that your upgrades are sort of divided that bit more. So there's more to worry about in terms of like what your setup is in terms of combat, not just the weapon you're building, but also, how you're using all of these different moves. Similarly, when you're going through the world, there's more to worry about because you're collecting items as you go through the world, like almost like currencies. So you're picking up like flower petals or, different bits and bobs, silver, different bits and bobs. And then when you're back at your hub base, like in the original Hades, where you're doing a lot of like upgrading your traits so that you're stronger, Zagreus was stronger going into the next level, all that sort of stuff. But you're also doing things like upgrading to try and unlock weapons. Similarly, just the meta progression in Hades 2, there's a lot more going on. There's like lots more going on. So the hub base area you're in is way bigger. It's maybe 3 times as big. You're adding in different characters, you're adding in there's a big cauldron in the middle that you're using to unlock different missions almost in the world. You're doing little things like, even planting something over here to try and see if you can make something else. The weapon stuff is bigger. Everything, everything's bigger basically in terms of the combat, the meta progression. And I'd say by the looks of it, probably everything, like the cast, I imagine too. Like this whole thing brings you up until, the first boss fight, which I completed on, I think it said it was my 5th attempt. Just all great voice acting, great art, all the stuff that you like about the first Hades. There's more of it. But it definitely goes deeper on the systems, which 100% I'm thinking about Amir thinking about a sequel. And I'm like, what would he do? What would he be interested in? What would Greg be interested in? What would all those folks be interested in?
Amir being the guy who, when I hung out with him in the studio, he would be reading the new Dota patch notes. And I was like, oh, you big into Dota? He's like, no, I haven't played in years. He just loves fucking systems.
He does. Systemic design. They're just way into it. And similarly, like you can see it with the art, with that whole art team over there. And of course, Gen Z, you can see, and I don't want to give away too much because like a lot of the joy of this game is meeting the characters and learning everyone's relationship to each other, and also learning when this is, because like it's, does this happen a year after the first Hades or a little bit longer, or especially in like Greek myth where you're never quite sure when anything is. And obviously time is a part of the narrative of this. But that means that like even returning characters, some of them look a bit different, and that's really cool. Or they've got different relationships than they used to have, like the different gods who you're turning up and they're like, oh, it's such and such. Like I've really enjoyed seeing, I wonder how Poseidon's doing. You know what I mean? Like I wonder how, what's the goddess of love again? She was my
Aphrodite.
favorite. Oh my God. I mean, the Aphrodite character art in the first game I basically fell in love with, and the one in this one is even
it's
better.
Horny.
It's horny, and it's even hornier now, and she is like,
I've seen that design for this.
Yeah, and the voice is amazing. Like just all the voice work is absolutely terrific, and yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I bet that first boss, And I was like, cool, and we're going to have to do this all over again. So I'm going to stop playing now because the early access will come out. But yeah, unsurprising. They've made another great game. I always feel like that, you know, in early access, that first game was really good, but it was better when it came out. They tightened up a lot of the screws. If I had some criticism of this one, I was sometimes confused by how many items I had or how many items things cost, because there's a lot of buying stuff, and I think the UIs, there's some parts where I'm not quite sure what's the number for how many is the cost and how many I have and how many I have left and stuff like that. And then in the world, what this stuff is used for, which was kind of in the first game too. They did a lot of like iconography without actually telling you what it is. You just kind of got used to the idea that like, oh, that's the Daedalus hammer icon. That's the, you know, the bull heart icon or whatever, you know, you sort of just got used to it. So maybe there's an element of that as well. But yeah, I've enjoyed it. It's good fun. Haven't played on Steam Deck yet. I'm sure it does run. I was playing on, controller the whole time, but yeah. Any final Hades 2 technical test questions?
For the technical test, what weapon do you just use the standard sword, or is it variety?
No, so the starting weapon is almost like a polearm, like a huge spear.
Oh, cool.
Which is good for ranged because one of the enemies in particular, and I'm very interested to see how they like balance this stuff over the next couple of months. But there's one, I think they're called a screamer or something. They're basically like a banshee that just fucking runs at you, and they feel like they're damaging the shit out of you. I'm not sure if they are, but they feel like they are when they're close to you. And Melenui, one of her weapons, she has a cast on B that basically creates an AoE that slows people down. So that is like a must against them. But with the polearm, you've got the distance as well. You can sort of keep them away. The other weapon you unlock, maybe there's more, but the second weapon you unlock is basically like just like twin swords, but it's way closer and way faster. But you also unlock like, you know, I unlocked a pickaxe so I could mine silver. You know what I mean? Like there's stuff like that. You see things out in the world. And they have a lot of like new, and I won't spoil any of this, but they have a new, you know, characters you run into in the world, you know, that aren't, some of whom are antagonists, some of whom are, you know, antagonistic, some of whom are helpful. Lots of non-human characters that are interesting and fun. Like the new Dusa. I won't tell you anything, but they have like somebody who's the Dusa of this game, and she's fucking great. There's other characters that are around that you can't talk to that you're like, oh, I'll get to talk to them later. Like that's going to be cool. There's other people in your little hub area that I've never met before. Don't know who they are. They're like new and interesting characters. So there's a bunch that way too.
I'm so excited for the characters in this game. I had a bizarre experience when the first time I played Hades, the original Hades, like when we were working on the dock, the game was like a secret. I sat down with Greg and he was like, you want to just like play it and see it? And it was so strange because before Hades came out, if you Google Zagreus, you get Hades.
Right.
Before, Zagreus was like a very kind of minor mythological figure. But because I double majored in filmmaking and religious studies, I knew who Zagreus was. It was utterly bizarre to have, like, Melinoway is the same thing. It's like a there's all these things. There's like a bunch of different interpretations of, like, you know, Melinoway is like a chthonic nymph, but also potentially like an alias for Hecate, and like there's a million different ways to interpret it. But I studied a lot of the like cult religions, like the Orphic cults and ancient Greece, and like Eleusis, the like initiation rites kind of near Athens. And Zagreus is potentially one of the aliases for Orphic Dionysus, which is this like
funny
bizarre cultic figure. So it was so weird sitting down to play Hades, because it was imagine like the most niche thing you've ever been into in your life. And then you're like working at your video games job and they're like, hey, we made a game about that like weird thing only you care about. It was just so fucking strange.
So you're probably gonna love all of these like new combinations of new people, new gods, first of all, because this one does seem to like, because I knew you were into like a lot of that sort of like I don't know, in my head it's like paganism meets Greek mythology or whatever, but this seems to be bending towards a lot more of that stuff, which may or may not be the case. So I'm very interested in what you my favorite thing about, because I'm a Greek history or Greek god sort of like a hobbyist. Like I enjoy the stories and stuff like that, but I definitely didn't study in college it. But I was just really happy that the game pronounces Demeter the way I do. Because whenever people say Demeter, it does my fucking head in. So I was which I think is actually probably more accurate. I'm not sure, but I've always called her Demeter. So when the game did, I was like, oh,
I think Demeter is actually more accurate. I don't know. I feel like Demeter sounds like an Americanization of it.
Overpronunciation of an E maybe in there, like semi-final kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like when people read like Japanese, like manga, it sticks because it's like what you hear people say, but it's the character in Japanese is ma, so it's like manga. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But then if you try too hard, then you're that guy who's like, actually, it's manga. Actually,
Akira. I've been watching Akira. Yeah.
Yeah.
Been watching a lot of Shogun recently, so that's probably helping do a lot of that.
Nice.
Engine. Any final Hades 2 questions?
Hades I'm 2? Psyched to play it.
Yeah, I'm excited to play it.
They made a sequel.
Yeah. My biggest question is if it drops in early access, is it coming to consoles? Because I can play it on PC, but I like grinding achievements and trophies, so I don't know.
It's a good question. I wonder. Their pipeline has usually been one platform. I also wonder, are they going to do? They probably are going to do Epic again this time. Oh yeah. But I doubt they have the business deal they had last time. Although who fucking knows? Oh, it says it'll be initially, I'm on the Wikipedia here, initially exclusive to Windows via Steam and the Epic Game Store. The Supergiant has plans to bring to other systems. So I would suspect, they're so pragmatic there, I suspect they're going to keep it early access on PC. Also, like, their early access is kind of like, as much as it is somewhat getting a bit more funds, to me, I think they do their early access in a very weird doing this because we need to refine the game situate kind of way. So if they're busy trying to get this thing running properly on multiple machines, it probably is just taking time away from the real reason to do it.
I also think console gating it is kind of like a natural way of having like a threshold to cross when it's fully released. Because I think like Hades blew up in such a way that people I know who are not people who are not capital G gamers played Hades because it was accessible and fun and popular and looked good and was, fun to play and whatever. So I think like leaving that towards the end, I think is also a natural form of progression to work towards, as opposed to having everyone have early access to it the entire time.
I wonder how long it'll be in early access for, because they solved a lot of their design. They've never had to do this. They've, like Bastion to Transistor, like go watch all of our documentaries on every Supergiant game. But like the start of Transistor was them fucking doing tech demos for like 6 months, right? And like throwing everything out. And then similarly with Pyre, like figuring out what the fuck that game was, and then Hades as well. I was about to say Hades 2. Hades also, they had to reinvent the wheel. This is the first time they've been like, oh, we have the engine, we know the characters, we know how to do this art. We're past pre-production in a lot of ways. We just need to like figure out what the game is, the story, the characters, the weapons, like all that stuff that you still have to do. There's still a lot of game to make, but I do wonder how far along they are on the path, because also a lot of the questions they were asking during early access were technical ones. And now I suspect with this technical test, they're answering a lot of those questions right off the bat. And it's just going to be a content push from now on. So who knows? Like the early access of the first game was in early access for, I want to say almost 2 years, a year and a half, I think it was. Was it December? It was Game Awards until I think Hades 1 came out in, was it August of 2021? Am I right? Timing is so hard.
I know.
2020. God, it came out in 2020. Of course it did. The last episode. September, is it?
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
August 2021, September. Yeah. And then early access was September 2020. Is that right? That can't be right. No, that's not right. Anyway, looks like it's about a year and a half. Or 2 years, almost 2 years. So I wonder, like, I don't know. Maybe it will be that long. Maybe it won't be. We'll have to see. If early access launches and it's got like fucking 4 biomes in it, then we're like, oh, okay. No, this is coming out like later this year. But I don't suspect that necessarily, but we'll have to see. Well, it looks like we won't have to wait long. They said that this technical test is going to be over soon, I think, and then early access is coming thick soon after. So there you go. Very cool. I hope we get to do another documentary with those guys. Because they make awesome games.
Yeah, we've so thoroughly documented their development history. In fact, it's something I've been thinking a lot about recently when thinking of ideas for future docs I'd like to do, is that they're like, if someone has a question, if someone loves Hades and they're like, whoa, this game is crazy, I wonder like how it was made, I wonder how they decide on these things. It's cool that we've created a record of that. And now I've been kind of interrogating my history of games I've loved and like looking them up and seeing how much information is there about the development of these games. And the ones that are that have the least accessible information are kind of ones now that I am becoming more obsessed with tracking down interviews on. Very because cool. Like, you know, like a lot of what we do is, you know, we love video games and we just want to like talk to people about video games and preserve the history and stuff. But there is kind of occasionally we get to do sort of like an investigative journalism thing where we get to ask people about things that are lesser talked about, or they give answers that unexpectedly reveal information that isn't out there yet. So I've become more interested in being like, who can we hit up that, you know, like what games have been made that people love but don't really know that much about how they were made, and can we get the people to talk about them?
Yeah, totally. And there was so much on the table with that original Hades one as well. I feel like it would be very easy for us to do like a deep dive on that. We know that game so well, and that's half the problem when you're doing documentaries, is you really need to know the game. A lot of the time you need to either play a lot of it or just have like a broad knowledge of it. Yeah, we can't break the streak, you know? We got them all. Bastion, Transistor. Here's the last question when it comes to this. If you could go back to any one of their other 3 games, which one would you make a sequel to? Bastion, Transistor, Pyre.
Ooh, I think probably Transistor. I don't know. Transistor's so good. I think Bastion is so like pick up and play, but Transistor like touched me on a deeper level, I think.
Frank?
I did really like Transistor. Like I got the platinum in it, but I haven't revisited Bastion. Like I played it when it came out on Xbox Live Arcade, and I've never replayed it, so I would absolutely play a sequel to Bastion.
Right. I think I'd go Transistor as well. I have a big poster of Red right outside this door. It's like a very important game to me. I absolutely adored it. And also I can see there are elements of the combat in that game that are a little bit like, oh, they don't have the experience they had when they made Hades. Like they would be able to tighten this stuff up in an interesting way. But I just think the vibe and the music in that game is great. Oh, by the way, music in Hades 2 is fucking dope. Darren Korb, who knew? What a fucking surprise. Darren Korb's done a great job on the music. Yeah, and the sound, God, the sound, just the punchy, the compression on the voices, on the voice acting, all the voice actors they get, it's such a, I was listening to a podcast while I was playing it, and for about 10 seconds, and I was like, no, I just can't when I'm playing this game. And all the music's too good, the characters, sound effects are too punchy. When they swoop in and start talking to her, you know, Aphrodite turns up, and I have to just sit there with my face under my hands, listening to her speak. Yes, mommy. Tell me what you want, mommy. I'll do anything. There you go. Hades 2, Fallout 70. I can't believe. If you'd have told me in 2024 we'd have a podcast where we talked about Hades and Fallout 76 in the same, I would have said you are crazy. But there you go. Frank, before we get out of here, we have an email I think that came through.
Yeah, we had an email, and if people do want to send us an email, send us a message at podcast@noclip.video or in our Discord for patrons. August Graham sent an email. What do you value in video game narratives? Also, what are your thoughts on video games and gambling games becoming more similar as businesses have recognized potential profits? How do you guys feel media writing and generally human narratives have changed since the internet has proliferated the planet?
Jesus Christ, how many questions are here, Frank? Right? You said there's one question.
They wrote 3. And always glad to hear your individual thoughts on the pod as well as your incredible documentary works. Thank you for all your hard work, an avid NoClip viewer. But yeah, let's take the top one. What do you value in video game narratives?
Man, that's a broad question. And I'm just thinking about Hades. So I'm like, I don't know. I'm not a writer. I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know enough about writing. I could not tell you.
It's rare for me to really care about video game stories, so I feel like the more tropey or like B-movie-esque, the better. That's why I love that, yeah? Max Payne and Resident Evil are both so like almost like satirical in how silly and over the top they are, but that's why I like them. So I don't know. I feel like stories always like so far back when it comes to video games. If a game gets me, like Metal Gear or Last of Us, that's amazing. But that's like I care more about the setting or tone. So I don't know.
I personally, you could give me the most like convoluted, obscure, murky story in the world. If you fill it with good, compelling, dynamic, 3-dimensional characters, I'll fucking go to bat for you. I like games where, this is why I always liked RPGs as a kid, is I like games where you meet characters and the relationship between your character and their character is something that is dynamic and changing and evolving. I like games with found family. I like games where you meet a character and they're kind of like, I'm out here for myself, kid. Like, don't fucking look to me for answers. And then like 5 hours later, they're like, I won't let you die, dude. Like, fucking, I love watching that evolution.
Speaking of watch, did you finish Fallout?
No, not yet.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
We'll check in on that later. And then what are our thoughts on video games? I'm going to cut the last one just because we're running over here. Thoughts on video games and gambling becoming more similar as businesses of record. I don't know, have they? Like, I don't know. Like, I think if you went into an arcade 20 years ago, they reflected the video games of 20 years ago. Like, it's just, I think that it maybe looks that way sometimes because you go into an arcade and it's all digital screens, or, a casino. And not arcade, a casino, and it's all digital screens and stuff like that. I think gameplay wise, video games have started to do more things that the gambling industry has been doing for a long time.
Yeah.
So in many ways, I think we're sort of late to the party on it. And I do think there should still be some, like, I was banging this drum about Destiny years ago with the Skinner box stuff. And there's aspects of live games that I think are anti-gaming. Like, but it's funny because, like, sometimes we were happy to submit to that stuff as well, like, because we had a long day of work and we don't want to have to I don't need a big narrative thing right now. I just want to see the numbers go up. So it's hard. It's hard to account for what is something that is predatory, I guess, when money is involved. But then also we live in an attention economy now. So your time is money. So, like, where is that threshold? I honestly don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I fucking hate microtransactions. So like, and I know they've gotten more normalized, and I've had to kind of like not die on that hill just because I don't want to be the old fogey. It's too tiring a conversation to have every time. But like, I think all that shit sucks. I think like it draws focus away from the things that matter, which are like game design and narrative and immersion and theme and atmosphere. And I think all that shit sucks, and I wish there was less of it. And I think we should get rid of it, and we should return to tradition. I'm just kidding about that part. But yeah, no, I don't know. I think, it's less gambling, but I think that it plays into it because a lot of the microtransaction stuff is like, buy the ultimate prize box and see what's inside. And you're like, I gotta know what's inside the prize box, and it's only $5.
What's in the prize box? There should be a DLC for Pulp Fiction where they tell you what's in the case.
Exactly.
Like a little 5-minute little video after the fact. Oh, cool. All right.
I would buy that.
Yeah, I would buy that too. Thanks to August for the email. There was a segue that was sitting right there, and I've forgotten it now because I've gone over my 90 minutes of podcast. I've turned into pudding brain Danny. There you go. If you're interested in hearing about games design and how they maybe are close to gambling, you should check out our upcoming Balatro interview over on our new podcast feed, which is not up now, but should be by the time this podcast is up. So we'll stick like a link in the description or something like that. The new podcast show is called Dear Dwyery. It is an interview show where myself and a guest talk about some aspect of the world of video games. They are edited by Jesse Garasha. Sort of sitting in the middle of not quite like a life well wasted levels of production, but way more. It's not just a sit down conversational podcast. We're telling stories. There's voiceover. Really sort of like piece together stories. So the first one's all about the development of Balatro. And we have other ones like the anniversary of New Blood turning 10 years old. We had a conversation with the developers of Pacific Drive. Talked to Reb Ford about Warframe, which came up earlier today as well. And we've got more and more in the pipeline as well. We're going to get episodes out every 2 weeks is the plan, because these are edited episodes. There's no ads on the feed. There's no patron exclusive stuff with this one. We're just getting it out there, kind of like our documentaries. And the idea is that it creates a space for us to get more documentary stories out there, but also a way for me to like talk about stuff that I find interesting that that I think would be fun to produce these like mini audio documentaries about, basically. So Dear Dwyery, Dwyery is the the name of the show. It's got my big face. Jeff Delgado did a great job on the thumbnail art, on the show art. So shout out to Jeff for that. And the trailer should be up by the time this podcast is out. And then we will be following up, I believe, next week on May 1st with the first episode, which is all about Balatro, or Balatro, as it's supposed to be called, which is in the documentary, in the episode. You'll check it out there. Aside from that, we got other bits and bobs coming up. Jane Dev Part 4 is coming up on Crew, along with a fast session for Fallout 4. And you guys are playing that Brotherhood of Steel ARPG, is that right? At some stage?
Yeah, tomorrow, I think, right?
Yeah, tomorrow we're gonna take a look at Brotherhood of Steel.
Hell yeah. Not Fallout Tactics.
Brotherhood of Steel. Also called Brotherhood of Steel.
The other one.
Yeah.
So look out for that stuff over on Noclip Crew. And yeah, a bunch of other documentaries on Dwarf Fortress, Hyperlight Breaker, some type of Eldritch Horror indie water-based game, which I don't know why I'm even not just saying the fucking name. I don't know why I'm dreading saying the name. That was even close to it. And a bunch of other ones. Oh, Wipeout and loads of other stuff. We're doing the work over here. Patreon.com/Noclip if you want to support our work, or don't if you want us to disappear into the ether. We will see you like so many ghosts on this spooky episode of the Crewcast. Ooh.